So it's time for the closing ceremony of our DH 2014 with all your faces smiling on both sides. So from Frédéric, Kaplan and me, we are very thankful to you for all we have lived these days. First of all, now, I have the great honor and the great pleasure to welcome Professor Sukanta Chaudhuri, who is now Professor Emeritus at Jadavpur University after a long career teaching abroad and in India. In 1981, he published In Film Glory, Shakespeare and the Renaissance Image of Man, just 1 year after Stephen Greenblatt's Renaissance Self-Estioning from Moore to Shakespeare. This important Shakespearean journey in the 80s led him afterwards to different experiments, thinkings about textuality, until its famous metaphysics of text recently. But he is also a translator of several writers and poets Bengali, notably of Rabindranath Tagore, who is at the center of his lecture today. He is one of the first Indian DHers. With other colleagues, he has founded at the Jadavpur University the School of Cultural Text and Records. He was its director until 2010. And so we find orality inside of his love for textuality. Today we are pleased to listen to his lecture, Tagore and Beyond, looking at the large literary database. I have found a verse in Tagore's poetry that fits quite well with our Swiss weather. Clouds come floating into my life, no longer to carry rain or usher storm, but to add color to my sunset sky. Welcome, Professor Chaudhuri.
Thank you so much, Claire, for that very warm and generous introduction. And of course, thanks to the organizers of this conference for this privilege of asking me to deliver this closing plenary. And I'm particularly delighted at this opportunity to talk to such a large audience drawn from across the world about the Tagore Verhoeven Vichitra, of which, well, I was formerly the head, but the actual work was done by a wonderful team of young people, about whom I'll tell you a little bit more in the course of this lecture. So that is the home page, or the salient part of the home page anyway. Now, I'm particularly delighted and, in a sense, well, I should say surprised, but glad of this rare opportunity, because Vichitra deals primarily with Bengali material. And though Bengali is the 7th most widely spoken language on earth, it is not a world language in terms of cultural politics. Its alphabet, though phonetic, works differently from the Roman in a way that I'll explain, which places it outside the mainstream of digitizing technology. And Rabindranath Tagore, or Thakur, as he's called in his own language, is little more than a name to most readers across the world, although those who can read him in the original place him alongside Dante, Shakespeare, and Goethe. But apart from the value of his own work, Tagore affords the best possible scope for an ambitious exercise in textual computing. This is chiefly owing to a few factors, of which the first, it happens both ways. The first relates to those figures you have up there. He wrote voluminously. Another way of putting it is that his collected works in Bengali come to 32 volumes, with more to come. His collected works in English come to 4 huge volumes, the equivalent of 8 or 10 of those Bengali volumes, with much more to come. And all this only comprises the standard version of the text without the variants, which we have taken into account in our website. And there is indeed a huge quantity of variants. He revised his works indefatigably. There are at least 3 or 4 versions of most major works, manuscript and print, sometimes 8, 10, or more. The maximum we have come across, fortunately only for a few short poems and songs, is 20. And the third factor is the continual reprinting of his major works. Thus, a full-scale electronic database of Tagore's works would constitute the all-time repository of practically every imaginable issue of textual genetics and editorial strategy. I remember once talking about this with Hans Gabler, the German scholar of Joyce and much else, and he said, well, jokingly, of course, but not entirely jokingly, you've convinced me that every student of textual scholarship should learn a little Bengali to really learn his trade. I had a long-time dream of creating such a database. This dream was fulfilled when, in the year 2011, the government of India provided a very generous grant to commemorate Tagore's 150th birth anniversary by presenting his works in this way to the world. Just a couple of small points. First of all, the name Bichitra, I think some of you said they're a little surprised not to find to find Tagore's name incorporated in the title. Anyway, the word Bichitra means the various, okay, which seemed an appropriate name for the Verhoeven edition. Secondly, the apparatus of Bichitra is in 3 languages. You'll see if you, well, actually, this is not the entire homepage, but on the top right corner of the homepage, there's a little panel which you can click to have a totally English version of the apparatus. And as I've just told you, and as of course you knew already, Tagore also wrote extensively in English, so that it's possible to make your way through the entire website and to savor a part of its contents using the English language alone, though the most complex and challenging textual problems can only be viewed in the Bengali language. And thirdly, I think I should here add a proviso to a rash claim that I made, and which even sort of went past the conference organizers and has been printed in the program, that this is the largest literary database. I'm not sure I want to withdraw that claim, but well, as somebody pointed out, of course, the largest literary database, no doubt, is Google Books. But even if you discount that, there may be 1 or 2 other projects which can lay a rival claim to the title, but still, it is pretty large. To tell you in due course quite how large. See, the story of Bichitra is really 2 stories. One is the technical or digital, but the second, no less important, is the human. To process and transcribe, this is how large it is, 140,000 pages of primary material, 50,000 of them in manuscript. To create various customized programs for processing that material, including a novel 3-tier collation program, to design an adequate website and upload the vast and varied contents, and to complete all this work in a span of 2 years. All this involved a human, no less than a technical challenge. For those 2 years, I had the stressful but richly rewarding experience of working with a core team of 30 and a floating body of other contributors. And this is what I always feel most proud to declare. Everybody who had any kind of hands-on contact with the program, made hands-on contribution, as distinct from people like myself who signed the papers and just kept a benevolent eye. Every direct worker on the program was below the age of 35. With one partial exception, they had degrees from Indian universities alone, in most cases from our home university, Jadavpur. Nearly all were originally trained in the humanities, and though all were computer savvy in a general way, only a few had previous experience of textual computing. So if I may depart from my prepared text for a minute or so, I'd like to say that, we were kind of working in an environment with some experience of digital archiving at image level, but virtually none of the digital processing of texts beyond a couple of experimental CDs of separate works by Tagore that we ourselves had produced earlier on. in Levi-Strauss's terms, we were bricoleurs rather than engineers, as it were. And is it as bricoleurs that we put together this kind of Heath Robinson structure of a website? That, however, is to date chugging along quite smoothly. And in the process, certainly and I think I can also answer for my young colleagues, that we experienced a kind of deep creative satisfaction that kept us going, and that actually most of you may sadly never have the chance to experience, as you do not work in a milieu where you begin by putting together the very basic pieces of your project from the ground up. And that is why, you see, although I shall talk chiefly about the website and then about various future possibilities arising out of that website, I'd just like to mention as emphatically as possible about this kind of human story as a constant subtext of the technical. There is a third story too, a sequel that we will, I hope, unfold in the future. And to indicate that potential will be an equally important part of my presentation. In fact, it will occupy the second half of my presentation, more or less. But before the sequel, even before the story itself, there is a prequel, as we say sometimes, relating to the font and the OCR, or rather the absence of OCR, in good measure. Bichitra consists chiefly of Bengali material. The Bengali alphabet is complicated by two factors. Unlike, say, the Roman, each letter is not written separately. The vowels, sorry, I moved too far on. The vowels are indicated by abbreviated tags or markers attached to the consonants. Now there's a little something one can click to. If I can locate it, I think this is it. No, it isn't. Anyway, you can see for yourself, the thing at the top there's the letter ka, followed by the vowel a. But when you want to produce the syllable ka, you only write the consonant in full, and you simply add the vertical line at the right-hand side to indicate the vowel a. And to complicate the matter further and thoroughly confuse many computer programs, that vowel marker can be written either, I think something's happened in the course of the transfer of this PowerPoint presentation from one disk to another, because not all these have been figures have been preserved in their entirety. But anyway, look at the top right and the bottom left have got corrupted, forget about them. But the one on the right, that is ki, ka, followed by the long e sound. That's at the right. But let's move on to the next one. We might have better luck with that. Again, this is, look at the top left, that is ku. The vowel marker for the u comes under, at the bottom of the consonant. And I think the problem is it's been transferred to a computer which does not, in fact, have the necessary software for Bengali the alphabet, which is distorted things a little. But anyway, the bottom left is the combination ko, ka, with the diphthongized vowel o, and that ko really comes where you see the dot. You see? So there's a bit at the front, a bit at the back, and a bit on top, all part of the same vowel marker. Now, just to present this visually is an extremely complicated matter. And the two that you see on the right-hand column, these are, again, they're hu and ru, but they are, for those who know the Bengali alphabet, they're not presented in the conventional way. See, they are sort of special, unique configurations for these particular combinations of consonants and vowels. And yes, these have come out okay, fortunately. The 2, 3, or even 4 consonants and vowels will be combined in a single glyph, which bears no resemblance to its constituent letters and whose appearance varies widely from font to font, from one type design to another. Okay. The one at the top, in red, is a combination of the two letters k and th, but as you can see, the combination looks nothing like either of the two original letters. The second one is a combination of k and sh. Again, it looks nothing like the original. And the one on the bottom is a combination of 4 letters, sh, t, r, and e. All this makes the task of learning the Bengali letters a very hard work for the Bengali child, but it also makes it very hard work for any computer. See? And so though the alphabet consists only of about 50 letters, the number of glyphs can run up to 250 in a modern type case, and 400 or more in old type cases like those used in the 19th century when Tagore first began to publish. These factors made for a degree of instability in most Bengali input systems of earlier vintage. But today, we have an input system OBRO, spelled like that in English, designed by Omicron Lab of Dhaka in Bangladesh, which is not only stable, but phonetically scientific. In other words, the glyphs for those conjunct letters are created by integrating the constituent letters. So if later you want to collate, or suppose you want to do a spell check, that conjunct letter would, the computer could, as it were, dismantle the conjunct letters into its, the conjunct glyph, I should say, into its constituent letters and deal with each of them separately. We have never met the members of Omicron Lab, who, though they live maybe 200 or 300 miles from us, are separated by an international border. We use the software under a Creative Commons license that they've generously made available to everybody. But Bengali computing owes them a deep debt, and it makes it possible to compute in Bengali in a way that may not be possible, I rather suspect is not possible as of now, in most other Indian languages. These are North Indian languages of alphabets operating more or less in the same way. And so I think somebody should investigate how to adapt their system to other alphabets on similar principles, as in the Indic or perhaps the Semitic language families. Now, this plethora of vowel markers and conjunct letters makes it impracticable and expensive to develop OCR programs in Bengali. It is vastly more economical of both time and cost to enter the text by hand, especially when a third of it is in manuscript, and the rest in a welter of different type designs used over 100 years. We had 25 keyboard operators transcribing and then checking, sort of doubling the work, as it were, approximately 140,000 pages, 50,000 of them in manuscripts with a lot of cancellations and all that kind of thing. I'll come to that shortly. In approximately 350 working days, chiefly using the Bengali keyboard, which is much more cumbersome to use than the English keyboard, as practically every letter requires the use of both hands. We had the advantage of one OCR program developed in-house by a former colleague at Jadavpur for the font used in the standard edition of Tagore's Bengali works, as circulated today. So the other versions did not have to be entered from scratch, but only by making necessary changes in this master text. These changes were sometimes so extensive as to require full, fresh keying in, at other times so few and subtle as to demand unwavering concentration. So the OCR master text was a partial relief at best, and of course it's not a total relief even if we're using the Roman alphabet, as we all do, but even for that partial relief, we sent up much thanks. Now let's move on to the actual transcription. The first major component of Bichitra consists of image files of all the material with transcriptions of the manuscripts. Well, let's move on a little and then I'll come back to these pages. Okay, there is an image of a manuscript on the page of an old diary, and there is the transcription next to it. The transcription incorporates all paleographical features, including deletions, later insertions, transpositions, marginal comments, everything. But they are in plain text files. HTML markup was added during processing in our collation program, but these files, they are notepad files, plain text files. The entire operation was carried out without applying any kind of markup or TEI or any other protocol. This was, at bedrock level, a choice dictated by necessity. The Bengali keyboard is cumbersome to use. If, moreover, we had required the operators to be trained in XML or TEI, we would simply have not found them. Instead, we use the surface resources of the keyboard, symbols present there or easily extracted from the symbols menu of any standard word processing program. So if you can look this up on the website of the guidelines. These are precisely, and this is all the kind of markup or encoding, or call it what you will, that our transcribers had to learn before they could set to work. That's it. See, they'd have run screaming if they'd been presented with the TEI protocol. See? So, now, and I would like to suggest, especially after that very stimulating discussion in the GoDH session yesterday, that if we envisage a future where text files are created manually on a large scale, especially in non-Latin fonts, just for practical reasons, we might need a method as uncomplicated as this, involving no formal training in markup protocol. Now, beyond the point, of course, the text encoded in this way becomes too complicated to decipher. See, over there, the angular brackets indicate deletions, the second bracket, or the curly bracket, insertions. The triple plus sign indicates something which is undecipherable. And no, skip one, it doesn't matter. Okay. You see these signs like sort of caret marks and inverted caret marks. They indicate alternative readings in the manuscript, neither of which has been cancelled. Okay. And there are similar signs to indicate transpositions, to indicate the place from where a cluster of words might have been taken, and another to indicate the place to which it has been removed, so on. Now, something like this becomes too complicated to decipher if you just want to read the text. So we also created a filter program, it was designed by a graduate student of our university, to extract the final text emerging from the manuscript, eliminating the earlier readings. A clean text for the end user, or for use with later applications like the collation program, which could add its own markup if required. It should be possible, though we haven't done it yet, to modify our filter program to retain certain symbols while eliminating the rest. That is to say, to capture the text at a particular genetic stage or to focus on a particular genetic feature. And I would just therefore like to put this question, which may seem utterly unrealistic, beyond all need to make a virtue of necessity. Can there be any absolute virtues to a system of just sort of very moderate, surface level markup, if you want to call it that? Literally, I suppose it is that. See? Can textual computing ever free itself from sort of embedded markup, not only for transcription, but for all kinds of search and retrieval? Can we, for instance, register attributes by indexing rather than encoding, or variants by parallel transcription in the same file and then selective filtering? Now, before I'm dragged off the stage for my naivety, we'll just better get off the subject right here. But just pointing out that what I'll go on to show you right now is a collation program, which does a sort of layered collation, line, paragraph, speech in a play, scene in a play, chapter in a long prose work, simply by applying the line break, the enter key, 1, 2, or 3 times as the case may be. And it has worked on this rather elaborate collation program. In fact, what I now want to spend the rest of my time talking about is how to utilize a large corpus like that thrown up by Bichitra for textual rather than linguistic investigations. But my best point of entry might be by showing you our innovative collation program, which we have named Probhed, or difference. Now, as I've just said, maybe I didn't quite say it, but so not to. Probhed can collate a text at 3 levels. It can take a long text, let us say a long novel, and first match the matching chapters in the different versions. Within each chapter, it can then compare paragraph by paragraph, and within each paragraph, it can compare word by word. I mean, this is how it goes, actually. This is in fact, it would have been nice if I could have actually accessed the internet and shown this to you sort of live, as it were. But I was advised that this would be a singularly unwise thing to do, and because of the sort of complicated sort of system of remote signals through which the computer there would access the text. So what you're seeing is a set of screenshots, but I assure you, there is no deception. I mean, if you click on where I said that I've clicked before taking these web shots, you will get the results. When you first open the collation program, this is the perhaps unexpected visual that you will see. Each of these color-coded bands represents one version of the text. What you're seeing here are 7 different versions of a play called Ochalayaton. Okay. And the segments, shaded to provide a contrast to the eye, the segments indicate the different scenes of that play. You cannot, as of now, differentiate between acts and scenes. In fact, in many of the plays, it doesn't really matter. There's no two-level difference. You can take any of these versions as your base text and compare it with all the others. In this particular screenshot you see here, what I took as the base text was the one in red or orange, as it were, is a manuscript of the play. Now, you will also note that bottom panel, where you have, if you look closely, a percentage count of the match of each version with the base. Okay? It gives an exact percentage count. If you still don't trust it, if you suspect the computer might be sort of lying or drunk, then you can actually, I mean, that little square thing you see in the bottom panel. If you click it, then the actual text opens up in front of you. I mean, I've opened 2 in the screenshot. You can open any number you like, all of them, if you like. You can dismiss the program and compare it word for word yourself. However, if you are satisfied with the first level result, which is a scene by scene, or with say a novel or a long prose work, it will be the chapter by chapter comparison, then you can open up a single scene, as in this next screenshot I'll show you. Okay. These are the 7, each band here is a scene, the corresponding scenes. That particular scene I clicked on. And each little colored band within it is a speech. And, well, just for the heck of it, as this is manuscript number 244, I clicked on speech number 244 in that scene, and you find that the corresponding speeches have been indicated. And again, there's the percentage of correspondence shown down below. And now, if you further click on this right place in the bottom panel, then you get the word-for-word comparison, okay, in these 4 panels. But for the word-for-word comparison, I won't proceed with this. I'll turn instead to an English example, which all of you can follow. It's what is probably Tagore's best-known translation in English. It's a short poem from Gitanjali, the poem for which he won his Nobel Prize. A poem beginning with the line, "Where the mind is without fear and the head is held high." It's a poem which you're probably very familiar with. Anyway, it's a short poem, of course, so you don't really need to go through the chapter and the earlier divisions. So it is there. You have to work your way through it. Then you come to this sort of 4-colored code. The black text indicates what is common to all the versions. There's the base text up there, and there are 5 other versions with which is being compared. The black text indicates what's common to the whole lot. The red text indicates where there is something corresponding in all the versions, where there is something corresponding in all the versions, but it might be different in some versions. And this is a screenshot of what happens when you click the red text on the word frittered up there. So it's found in 3 texts, numbers 1, 2, and 3, as listed there. the word frittered is replaced by the word broken. And again, if you want to make sure, you can open one of those texts in the bottom left window. You can open them one at a time and check. The computer's not lying. And then that red text is complemented by the green. The green always shows up as a dot, because the green is what is only present in this, is what is not present in this version, but is present in one or more others. So if you were to click on the green dot following frittered, again, I've moved too far ahead. Yes, this is the green dot following frittered, and in those three texts, you have the word up, because in those three texts, the preceding word is broken. So it reads broken up. And there's also some blue text. I put the blue word strenuous over there. Blue means something which is present in the base text, but is not present in one or more other versions. And you find that 4 of those texts do not have that word strenuous. And again, if you look at the top left corner showing one of those texts, you'll find, yes, the word strenuous is indeed absent. Now, so much for what you see on Bichitra. Right. Now let's proceed to what we might do with this, what not only we at Jadavpur University, but what maybe all of us can do with such tools. I mean, collation is the first, and so far really the only, major data mining operation carried out with the Bichitra corpus. Collectively considered, the corpus constitutes big data, okay? What Michael Whitmore and Jonathan Hope in a recent paper call a very large textual object. So I'll say VLTO for short. And maybe that's a useful term because, of course, compared to really big data, let us say the contents of a large public service website, not to mention the Google servers, a very large textual object is actually very small. It's small enough, therefore, to allow a degree of in-depth analysis in real-time input, in real time with closer input from the human faculties, which is impossible with the real giants. So maybe the large textual database can allow us to, as it were, as far as analysis goes, eat our big data cake and have it too. In pre-computer times, we analyze texts by paying heed to their unusual elements. Most obviously in English, not articles, prepositions, or conjunctions, but nouns and verbs, especially the rarer and more singular ones. As Whitmore and Hope put it in that article, we are, I quote, cognitively biased towards the unique. We focus on 3 oak trees in a wood rather than on the 1,000 birches surrounding them. Big data analysis, on the contrary, demands and technologically enables equal attention to all the trees. Yet this is and is not the case. We still want to distinguish between the beeches and the birches. To mine or analyze data, we must search and select, play off matches against differences, place X against whatever is not X. All data mining assumes this implicit deconstruction. Even when tallying ers and thers, we want to know their relative frequency and distribution, how they stand in relation to everything else. In other words, the more we refine a search, the more it approaches an exercise in collation. Just as, more obviously, collation is a special kind of search. I risk the observation that all textual computing comprises 2 basic operations, search and collation, each implicit in the other. Now, with the very large textual object, the field of this joint search cum collation expands incrementally. We now have a wood with 1,000 oaks and 100,000 birches, or 100,000 oaks and 10 million birches. We end up by having to count both of them the same way. The great new benefit accruing from this is, of course, what is now we can call without embarrassment. There's a term which attracted some opprobrium when Franco Moretti first introduced it, distant reading. Okay. Literary historians have traditionally focused on a relatively limited range of material. A computer database allows us to mine a much larger corpus, vastly larger corpus, to get at the big picture of textual production and textual transactions. Now, let me make my next point by showing 2 visuals which must be very well known to all of you. This is a screenshot relating to the Stanford project of the Republic of Letters, a graphic presentation of the movement of letters between London and other centers in 18th century Europe. Now, this is based solely on the mapping of metadata. Compare the mapping of the thematic content of the Iraq war logs, the product of Jonathan Stray's Overview project. In this visual, as in the earlier one, we move from node to node in a visually fluid manner through paths of varying width and directness and lettering of various size, depending on the volume of traffic. But we have moved a crucial step forward with this one. We are mapping not just metadata, but the data itself, the actual content of the text. As Jonathan Stray annotates, each report is a dot, and each dot is labeled by the 3 most characteristic words in that report. And this quantitative data can then be organized in multiple sets. Now, 3 identifying words is, of course, much too small a base for any but the most rudimentary analysis. Even so, we have crossed a watershed, because as a rule, almost as a necessity, big data is not microanalyzed for content. There is just too much of it. It is profiled by quantity and location. That is to say, by patterns of occurrence, by where and how many, rather than why or precisely what. I think we can claim, though others may dispute our claim, and I have something to say about that too, that textual data calls for special attention to its context and its content. It is constituted of words which are uniquely non-homogeneous, both in their individual identities and their groupings. A few months ago, a young programmer, one of the team of 3 who designed that collation software I've just shown you, this young man was telling me about his work on a still more ambitious software that might compare DNA sequences as well as variant texts. In fact, anything which varies. And he's done it. Exactly a week ago, last Friday, he showed me, and I can't answer for the DNA sequences, but it's certainly collating texts, having eliminated certain marginal problems and glitches which we have with ProbHate, which you've seen. However, when he told me about the DNA sequences vis-a-vis textual collation, I protested, saying that although I knew nothing about DNA sequences, and I accept, of course, that to record and compare them programmatically must be deeply challenging, a DNA sequence comprises only 4 base components, however often and however intensively repeated, varied, and combined. So I took leave to wonder whether it could be quite as challenging as the variable number of characters comprising verbal texts in different languages, and the endlessly open-ended patterns, as it were, into which they are organized at word, sentence, and higher levels. I felt momentarily less sure of my stand after a dialogue with a more senior colleague who was a very eminent theoretical life scientist. She pointed out, and I'm sure she's right, I take her word for it, that all proteins are composed of a varying number, in varying combinations, of 20 amino acids, each in 3 classes. Why, she asked, should the permutations of these 20 into 360 base units be less complex than those of the 26, or at most 26 into 2, if you take the uppercase letters separately, characters comprising the Roman alphabet as used in the English language, even if you throw in the punctuation marks? I would, however, argue that this is not really a parallel, as the characters are not organic to the word as, I presume, the amino acids are to the protein. A word can differ in spelling or in phonological utterance. Its semantic identity is unstable, and its many possible syntactical functions operate within a literally infinite number of potential sentences. Characters constituting words and words constituting sentences, to look no further at larger blocks of text, repeat endless syntheses of non-homogeneous elements. Even more fundamentally, an indefinite number of syntheses of spelling, word order, and morphological form is possible to represent what is essentially the same word or the same sentence. Much more variation would be permissible here than what would be acceptable as a mutant form of the same biological unit. The character, the word, the sentence, all these are semantic units. They are signs. signifying something outside and beyond themselves. This is not the case with any form of hard data constituting a stable record of a material reality, of a material entity. But, mutatis mutandis, this is true not only of textual, but of all humane or human data in vastly bigger sets as relating to epidemiology, disaster prediction and management, surveillance, administration and welfare programs, etc. The final measure of all such data is the human being, every one of them unique in constitution and circumstance. Hence, advances in textual big data mining and analysis may have crucial implications for the interpretation of all big data. So I've come back to Whitmore and Hope's premise with which I began. But instead of seeing a contrast between the unique and the ubiquitous, I'm trying to draw them together, and that in an opposite way to what I suggested earlier. Not by raising the stakes to 1,000 oaks and 100,000 birches, but by asking whether we can look at every one of those oaks, and indeed every one of those 100,000 birches, as a distinct and unique entity within the agglomerate. From considering textual constructs, can we extend the premise not only to other works of art, but to all expressions of human life and consciousness, the material of psychology and the social sciences, as well as literary studies, art criticism, or musicology. Anyway, let me sort of return to my own last, to the more modest compass of textual inquiry, where to fulfill such a purpose by using the very large textual object, the big data set, if I may use the term, the basic requirement seems to be the increasing fine-tuning of contextual data, assessing the unique significance of each use of a term by noting precisely where it occurs and what other terms occur around it. This is where, hitherto, we had presumed on the rarity of the search term. In traditional pre-computational textual analysis, it was possible to manually locate and contextualize every occurrence of what we considered the salient term or terms. It was sometimes long and hard work, but it could be done. With a large textual object, a term or feature that is rare by proportionate occurrence can be numerous in overall count. There may be so many instances of the search term that contextual distinctions get blurred, and to restore these distinctions must be the guiding aim of any data mining. And I would suggest a kind of incremental series of more and more advanced, sophisticated levels of data mining, starting with exact words, proceeding to words in variant forms, either using a lexicon or by wildcard searches, phrases or word combinations, limited proximity searches, wider proximity searches, which can be specific. We can select the terms and feed them to the computer, or we can leave the computer to work out kind of topic modeling. Clusters of words, special kind of proximity search, and the pattern of distribution of words, groups of words, whatever, through the total work or relatively within the different sections of a work. In other words, we are progressing beyond word searches per se to topic modeling, determining through recurrent clusters of words the subject or subjects of discourse. By collating the results of many such exercises, we can compare the use of language, hence of changing discourses and epistemologies across time, across geographical space, across disciplines and epistemic categories, hence, conceivably, redefine the boundaries between these areas of knowledge. We can also mine for semantic, by semantic and lexical criterion. We can do a search by the semantic or syntactical categories of words, as, for instance, Michael Whitmore has done with the search for using the docuscope, that, of course, subjectively categorized kind of groups of words and how they appear in various plays by Shakespeare, or in the much firmer, stabler basis of the Oxford Historical Thesaurus of the English Language, as was demonstrated by Mark Alexander and his team in a presentation at this conference yesterday, the day before yesterday, anyway. And we can also carry out more proximity searches and topic modeling to determine contextual meaning and, in particular, to determine metaphoricity. So I'm having some very stimulating conversations with some people in Cambridge, England, who are thinking of a large project along these lines to match various bodies of knowledge in the use of language. And one of the people closely connected with the project gave an example of the word remedy, which of course originally relates to medicine. But there are at least two other crucial contexts in which it occurs widely in the early modern period. One is the theological, and the other, I didn't know this, I learned this, was apparently the legal. Now, can we refine our proximity searches or exercise in topic modeling where we can throw up this kind of result? Trace both the total contextual history of particular words and the structure of texts, depending on the words they use. And of course, the third major criterion will be the grammatical structure and syntax, where we might greatly profit from the researches of computational linguists. I had suggested that all computational text analysis relies on two basic functions, search and collation. The hyperconcordance, leading back from search results to the full text, is an established tool. In fact, we have a hyperconcordance that we're also rather proud of for Vichitra, the Tagore, on the Tagore site, which was done, in fact, by 2 undergraduate students at my university. And now, Vichitra also offers a hypercollation program for 3-tier comparison, act or chapter, paragraph, and word, with back access to the full text. A very large database could be fully processed using hyperconcordance and hypercollation programs in increasingly more refined applications, and mined maybe in such ways as these. But word search, including proximity searches, I've already talked enough about this. Classifying the search results by date, author, or other fields, both for, not only for philological study, for the history of the language, philology in the narrow sense, but also the chronological development of themes and discourses, constituting an intellectual and ultimately epistemic history. Third, comparing metadata fields, date, author, genre, subject, etc., against each other and against texts. Tracing patterns of discursive structure over time, space, authors, or any other parameters we would like. Relating textual and verbal factors to bibliographical ones. For instance, noting whether particular readings in old Elizabethan plays happen to be what they are because they occur at a particular point of the page or at a particular point in the choir to answer the needs of casting off copy. And also carrying out multiple level collation, scene by scene, speech by speech, word by word, not only of versions of a single title, but where thought relevant, between different but related works, as to take 2 Shakespearean examples, between The Taming of the Shrew and The Taming of a Shrew, or between the Henry VI plays and certain quartos which definitely have a relationship with them, a disputed relationship. We have in Vichitra found it possible to compare both a novel version and a dramatic version of the same text, of the same story, shall we say, the same plot by Tagore, because they had a reasonable amount of verbal overlap. But beyond all these studies, most excitingly, we could use these resources to carry out the integrated analysis of the whole corpus as a single textual and cultural identity, not bound by particular authors or regions or genres or whatever. A whole new world of patterns and relationships would emerge, hitherto viewed piecemeal through manual compilations alone. I mean, distant reading, in other words, which you're already doing. What I'm saying is nothing new, but maybe we could mine large databases to do it much more intensively. Yet this comprehensive inquiry would equally allow us to zoom in on a particular work and define it much more sharply in relation to its context. For each work, we would gain a textual and bibliographical anchor within the corpus, according to its historical, philological, interpretative, or theoretical scholarship, and a full store of all possible precedents and parallels down to the minutest level among the other works in the corpus. We would cross a watershed whenever we pass from the closed search, setting specific terms for the computer to trace, to the much more productive open search, seeing what terms are thrown up contextually, and deciding on that basis what the next search would be. And this is the crucial point that I would like to end with. This ongoing critical examination of the output is absolutely vital, of course. As the least experience with topic modeling tells us, the topics thrown up by the computer may or may not be topics in the conceptual sense, bound by a common theme or discourse. And if they are, it will be on unexpected lines. Collation programs can record perfect literal matches that mislead us about the actual composition of the text. Let me show you one last screenshot from Vichitra. See, we are back at that opening page of the collation, showing and comparing a number of texts of that play, Ochalayathon. Now, by clicking, you're not seeing the entire screen. The bottom panel has been left out of this clip so that you see the rest of it more clearly. But if you click on a particular point of the bottom panel, then what you get is a comparison between two scenes in two versions. You see, I've clicked on the scene in the base text, and then by, again, clicking on any other text, though that particular scene is compared in those two texts, speech by speech. And those gray lines link up the corresponding speeches. Okay? Sometimes it's a straight link, sometimes there is transposition. But how did you explain that remarkable group of, the sort of railway junction effect, or of 2/3 of the way down, that long brown panel at the left, which is throwing out so many branches to so many different panels, and if you look carefully, you probably can't see from where you are. On the right-hand side, those paragraphs, the numbers are not in sequence. This, in fact, is one of the residual problems with Probhed that we also frankly pointed out, which we hope the new version that my colleague has devised can dispose of, which is that if a particular word or word cluster is repeated more than once, it can confuse the computer because it records all of them. It doesn't confuse the computer. The computer is being entirely logical, but it's doing it in such a way that it can confuse us. Okay. What is probably the case here is that you're getting the Bengali word corresponding to either enter or exit. This is a drama text, remember. So it's matching every other example of that word that it's finding in the corresponding text on the other side. Okay. Now, clearly some human intervention would be advisable at this point, so that then you could create a better software, as my colleague has done. These are examples of what I call mindless matches. Between passages of a critical size, critical mass, the mere recurrence of routine, often empty words, and a language like English is particularly liable to this because of the preponderance of articles, conjunctions, and prepositions. This can produce a 10 to 15% match between passages which have nothing in common. Unless, of course, you also use other factors like location, context, and so on. The chance overlap of another 10 or 15% words, which is especially likely between two passages on the same subject, might produce an overall false match if you set your threshold too low. The threshold in this software is adjustable. And again, as of now, the human judgment is required to adjust it. The large textual database can open up a new kind of dialogue between humans and computers. Basically, all these exercises involve asking the computer to do more of the data mining that hitherto we have carried out either manually and spatially or not at all. But it is crucial not to let the computer dictate the terms. Digital humanities should force us humans to think more precisely and fully about the terms of our inquiry. In fact, as I was discussing this with a few colleagues yesterday, and one of them came up with the remark that, was it me or was it somebody else? I'd like to think it was me, but maybe it wasn't, that as important as considering the implications of the word digital is comparing the implications of the word humanities. which the study of digital humanities is bound to, because approach it in a new way. It is only if that happens that we think more precisely and fully about the terms of our inquiry, that we can ask the computer to provide the relevant data sorted and processed to test those terms. As with all empirical testing by whatever means, the findings may or may not bear out our hypothesis. We thereupon assess the findings and accordingly put the next question to the computer. This, of course, is true of all computational methodology, not just that of the digital humanities. But maybe there's a special imperative in the digital humanities which makes us ask that question, or should make us ask that question, much more crucially than before. Thus, my last paragraph, the dialogue with the computer finally passes into a dialogue with ourselves. We assess the answers we obtain to the questions we have ourselves put to the computer, and then we assess them ourselves. This is no different from traditional humanist exercises. Our analysis of texts has always stemmed from our own epistemic position and perhaps helped to define it further. In the first instance, the large textual database affords unprecedented resources for carrying out these traditional exercises. It also puts these exercises in tandem with others which are conceptually possible only in the new perspectives opened up by the computer. To apply Catherine Hale's term in a new context, it is the large textual database can provide a material metaphor, or perhaps we should say a virtual metaphor, for the very practice of the digital humanities. Thank you.
So we have some minutes for a few questions, and I'm looking for the people with the microphone, please. Yeah, okay, there. So.
First of all, thank you very much for a very inspiring talk and for exposing me to a language that obviously I will never learn. There's not enough lifetime left, I'm afraid, for that. When you demonstrated what happens with these composite characters, it occurred to me that this is a good example for probably also the most basic methodological and conceptual distinction that we are grappling with in the digital humanities, namely that we humans often process these things holistically. For us, these are holistic phenomena. I do not know, it is a question and you will be able to answer that, whether a native speaker of Bengali would actually conceptualize of these things as composites that can be deconstructed. Is that not something that we learn in school, whereas a native speaker and somebody who just uses the language never actually has a need to do so? I remember that there were discussions in pedagogy in language acquisition, whether one should use the atomic approach or rather the holistic approach. And time and again in the digital humanities, we are faced with exactly this tension, the analytical and the phenomenological conceptualization of phenomena. The computer, of course, forces us to adopt the analytical, the digital, approach wherein we distinguish these phenomena into discrete bits and pieces, but our mind doesn't work like that. So my question is really, how do you feel about this inbuilt tension?
No, actually, this is a factor which even the native Bengali speaker or the native Bengali writer, because it concerns spelling, has to be aware of very much. Because Bengali spelling is still in the kind of fluid state that, let us say, English spelling was in the later 17th century. Not as much as it was in the 16th, but certainly in the later 17th century. In fact, English spelling is still in a fluid state, even if you stick to one side of the Atlantic. But Bengali certainly. And there are all kinds of spelling reforms that are proposed and debated, accepted by some and rejected by others, going on to this day and likely to continue into the future. And in the case of Tagore, it's particularly important because Tagore himself altered his spelling practice in various phases of his life. And because of his iconic influence, this affected Bengali spelling practice generally. And I can imagine, though as yet I haven't met any, that people might want to mine Tagore's works just to find out about his own varying spelling practices. So that is important. And another reason why it's important is that for collation, there may be words which are spelled slightly differently, but which are also the same word. And we need to have, this in fact is something that Probeth does not have, is a complete lexicon of spelling variants, which you can either turn on or off, so that the collation may, I mean, if it's the same word basically with a minor spelling difference, then it counts as the same word. It may or may not have that. At present, we can turn punctuation on and off. We cannot turn spelling variants on and off because we haven't compiled full lexicon of the spelling variants, but we could do that. No, so these are actually very living issues, even for the native Bengali reader. There are two people there. Oh, there's always some place.
This seems like a wonderful opportunity to explore interactions between different kinds of literary language across languages. And I wonder if you see potential within the interface that you've described here or within the kinds of markup that you're doing for a study of how a single literary mind expresses itself variously in English and in Bengali. I'd love to hear more about that.
Well, I mean, of course, this website affords all the material for that study, that to a degree which was not possible before, because we have these manuscripts. And in fact, one remarkable educative experience that we have had is how much time and attention Tagore lavished on his English works. Sometimes it seems even more than his Bengali. There are huge numbers of drafts of his English works. And he might do several completely different translations of some of his Bengali works. And all this has been made available for the first time online, or indeed generally available by the generosity of Harvard University. See, most of our material, to digress for a minute, I'll come back to your question. Most of our material came, of course, from Vishwabharati, which is the university founded by Tagore himself. It's about 100 miles away from Calcutta. And it is this huge Tagore archive and library. But we are grateful to many other contributors, who are all listed on our homepage, but particularly to Harvard, which has a large collection of Tagore's English manuscripts, which it very generously made available to us. And with one exception of the English Gitanjali, the others are, I think, being sort of made publicly available online or even in facsimile for the first time. I mean, to return to your question, all the material is available. But then, if you wanted to use computational means of comparing them, the Bengali against the English, well, no doubt it could be done. I mean, of course it could be done. I mean, in this company, many people who might be able to explain much better than me how it could be done, because I mean, we have not really thought about that at all. I mean, that kind of, what would in effect be a kind of a comparison between a translation and an original. But it would be a tricky business, because apart from the straight translations, there are a huge number of cases where bits and pieces of his Bengali works have come to be embedded in English works. Maybe a stanza from a poem, or a paragraph or two from a prose work. And to track all these down, it could, in a sense, only be done by computer. But if you're working across languages using some kind of bilingual lexicon, translation program, that would, I mean, it's a, I hope, I mean, maybe one day we'll do it, or somebody else will do it using our resources, and we'd be very happy to cooperate. But that would have to be a completely new line of inquiry opened up, I think. But we hope that this will make those further inquiries possible. And Vichitra, we regard it as a starting point, not as a resting place.
I have a question before someone else starts on the other side of the room. Here I am to your right.
Oh, okay.
Thank you very much for a wonderful speech. I believe you're too scholarly and intelligent to engage in alternate histories, but I would like to ask, what do you think the computing world would be like if the original language of computing were Bengali, for example?
The mind boggles, doesn't it? Actually, I hate to say this, and I don't know how many people are listening to the live stream back in Bengal, because then they sort of say me when I go back there. But I think it would probably make life more difficult for no other reason than that because of the way we write, all those conjunct letters, those vowel tags. It does undoubtedly create problems for the computer. But then, of course, because we used to thinking of the computer, everything to do with the computer is in terms of Roman alphabet, the Roman alphabet, where it's not. And if you were to really break it down into the binary code, the difference ultimately is in the visualization, not in the actual terms of the code. Am I right in saying that? I think I am. Yes. So, but what we would need to do, I think, is to, we would have had to do in such a case, would be to completely reinvent the way we write the Bengali language. There were sort of some proposals for doing so, even for print. And it would have been done even more computation for the computer. But otherwise, as far as the actual codes for the letters go, the characters go, presumably with any phonetic alphabet, as ours is, it would be the same.
You were talking about iterative search. So you take a word and you get some results, which returns some words, and then you would basically, you could iterate that, right? And one of the interesting things about that, if you talk about this kind of relationship between documents and words, or bags of words, or and clusters of words, it's essentially a classification. No, words. But yeah. So if you do that, it's a classification, and classification networks are much denser than the networks we are used to in social interaction. They have a mean diameter between 2 and 3. That means if you iterate your search 2 times, you reach all other words in the system. That means if you iterate your search a second time, your result is meaningless because you get the entire system back. That's very interesting because that's very similar to how our brains are connected. Our brain is so dense that basically if you follow 2 hops, you reach the all neurons in the brain. So the big question is, does that mean that it's not like reaching more words, which is the interesting thing in that kind of exploring texts, but in the sense of echoes, the text as a machine of gaps? Is it about like the not reaching in my local situation, the art form of a particular word in a particular context? It's not about like how it's in context, but what the context does not contain, and how can we realize that, right? So the big question is, all I said right now is essentially the same thinking people have in systems biology and in neuroscience, which I think we should not underestimate. There is an uncanny thing behind our thinking, which these people deal with all the time, and we should probably tackle it in the same way.
Well, it's a great question in every sense, and honestly, I think it's sort of too big because you've introduced me to one or 2 ideas which I'm thinking about for the first time, including what you set out with, that if you just repeat a search, you exhaust the entire field of the search. I'm sure you're right, but I have to, and no doubt this is sort of plain to everybody else in this audience, but I'll have to think about this a little more myself. And on that, look, would it be too Derridean to say that to search for what is around the word is necessarily also to search for what is not around the word? Okay, these are just, it's a way of whether a cup is, is chiefly empty or has a little bit of dregs at the bottom. But would the search for what is not there, is it computationally feasible? Or would it produce any results that the obverse search for what is there does not produce? Now, it's a great theoretical issue, but again, I'm putting this question to this learned company. I mean, in actual computational terms, would it help? Or would it be like, like trying to explain the motions of the planetary bodies in terms of the Ptolemaic system rather than the Copernican, which you can do. Mathematically, apparently, they work out. So the mathematicians tell us. But it's just a vastly more complicated way of arriving at the same results. Would that be the answer? I wonder. Okay.
Thank you again a lot. And now we switch to the last part of our closing ceremony. And it's an emotional moment because every 2 years we have to switch from an ADO chair to another one. And I pass the word to Neil Freistadt.
Thank you, Claire. All good things must come to an end. This goes for this wonderful conference, I'm sorry to say. I found especially inspiring our 4 keynotes, and my only regret is that Bethany Novitsky was not here in person to deliver what was one of the most searching, humane, and compassionate talks about our field that I've ever heard. For the outstanding quality of DH 2014, we owe a great debt to our local hosts, Claire and Frédéric. And could we give them another round of applause? Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Frédéric. We also owe a great debt to Melissa and the program committee. Their 2-year journey is now at an end. Thank you so much. All good things must come to an end, including my own 2-year term as chair of ADHO's steering committee. I'd like to thank the steering committee for entrusting me with this position and to say what an honor and a pleasure it has been to work with them in service to our ever-increasing and extraordinarily vibrant community. As my last act as steering committee chair, I'm delighted to introduce ADHO's incoming steering committee chair, John Nurbun, who will take the podium for some other announcements.
So just for the record, you were applauding Neil Freistadt. I haven't deserved any applause so far. But let's continue that to make it very explicit. Yeah, so I'm also honored and I'm looking forward to a term as the chair of the steering committee for ADHO. I think of it as an opportunity to serve the community here, which I'd like to do better. It's a real, it's a voluntary act for everyone involved in the steering committee. In fact, it's not even our expenses are reimbursed, but we get a lot of satisfaction out of seeing the field develop the way it has, the scientific development in particular, but also the level of interest that we see among you. I'm only going to mention one theme of the next 2 years that I'd like to really develop, and that's your own involvement in this conference and in digital humanities in general. I'd like to ask you to think hard about becoming more involved, and in particular, become more involved in this conference by being willing to review abstracts for it. Now, yeah, you're all laughing, I'm just trying to get you to work, but remember, that'll improve the quality of the conference. Right? We'll get a better conference if more people look at it and it has to be filtered through your very able minds and pens. Second, besides that, you'll be better informed about digital humanities. Okay, so I think that's a good reason. And third, finally, we're going to do a little bit more of that fairly ephemeral community building that Ray Siemens talked about so eloquently. there'll be more of a field there. And thinking about it, there aren't that many places where humanities scholars come together at all, right? But we're actually one of the exceptions in this. So it's an opportunity maybe to do something fairly original. Okay, I'm not going to bother you with more about that, but you will get a letter from me. And I promise you that. I'm going to stop now and ask Ivan Ida to talk about the awards for this conference.
Hello, it's me again. I lied to you on Wednesday. I said we were going to see history being made now. It's not true. It is rather the future we will see being made. We will see the future of digital humanities, at least one future of digital humanities. Let me introduce again Carina van Dalen-Oskam, who will present this year's winner of the 40-year prize.
As stated in the opening session, the Fortier Prize honors the memory of Paul Fortier, who passed away in 2005. The prize named after him is awarded for the best paper presented by a young scholar at the yearly Digital Humanities Conference. The recipient of the Fortier Prize receives a cash award of 500 British pounds and a featured publication of the presentation in one of the LADHUL publications, including assistance of the editor and staff of the designated publication to prepare the recipient's work for publication as needed. This year's shortlist consists of 4 papers, and I'll say a little bit about each of them before I announce the winner. Marie Saldana's presentation was about procedural modeling of ancient cities and buildings and showed beautiful visualizations. Anthony Jurity and James O'Sullivan presented very creative thoughts about reusability and electronic literature. And Jérôme Jacquin and Xavier Gradou introduced a tool for transcription and annotation of dialogue recordings in French, but with English slides that made it easy for those not fluent in French to follow their talk. And finally, Jill Belli gave an engaged talk about positive psychology, the quantified self, and such things as happiness apps and haptons. We have had a group of anonymous reviewers sitting in on the shortlisted presentations and sending us their reports. And we want to thank them very much for their valuable input. So who's the winner of this year's prize? I'll quote one of the reviewers on the winning paper. The presented research is the result of hands-on modeling, and it seems the presenter solved a lot of problems. Well-balanced interpretation with focus on the advances, but also discussing the drawbacks of the method. Open for suggestions for future steps. Well presented and good replies to the interesting questions from the room. I hope the winner is still around and will come onto the stage to receive the 2014 Fortier Prize. And the winner is Marie Saldana.
I'm very surprised, and it was very unexpected. It's my first time at the conference, and I'm very happy that there was so much interest in my work, which I think is, as 3D modeling becomes more and more adopted in digital humanities, I think this has been a really great chance for me to see what the possibilities are, and I'm really excited that this is the way I enter the community. Thank you very much.
So next on our agenda is Paul Arthur, who has Designs in Your Time just a year from now.
Wow, this is a big room. And first I have to start by saying what a wonderful meeting this is, and adding my thanks to the organisers, the local organisers, the PC chair and the program committee. I mean, it's just a fantastic event and a great celebration, a huge conference, and a really hard act to follow. But this is what's going to follow. This is next year in Sydney. We're going to be, we've just launching the website now in the last week or so. We've been busy arranging things already, and I'd like to acknowledge the work of my colleagues, Harold Short, who's here in the audience, and Jason Enzor. Jason is directing our local arrangements, and we're also working closely with Willard McCarty, who can't be here, but we have a large team of local organisers, and as well as the 50 or more people in our Digital Humanities research group who are all working together to welcome you in a year's time. The theme of the conference that's been chosen is Global Digital Humanities, and it was chosen for two reasons. One, to mark the movement of the field across languages, cultures and geographies, a truly global moment in this expanding field. And also because this is the first time that the conference will be moving outside of its traditional bases of North America and Europe in its 26-year history. We're very proud to have the chance to welcome you in our region of the world for this major conference. In fact, we're ready for you. This was some photographs in the auditorium last week, which is a 1,000-seat auditorium at the University of Western Sydney. We have a lovely historic campus of the University of Western Sydney to welcome you to at Parramatta, which is Australia's second inland settlement after Sydney. It's very close to Sydney. It's connected by the Sydney Harbour and the river. But it has a long history, including an important Indigenous history, which we'll be acknowledging. Our keynotes for the conference, I can announce, are on the web. Genevieve Bell from Intel Labs in the USA. She's an Australian, so we're very proud to have her. Jeffrey Schnapp from Harvard, a name that will be familiar to many of you in the community. And also someone that we know very well in our part of the world, but also has an international reputation, Tim Sherratt, who runs the Trove project of the National Library of Australia, a search and discovery and aggregation digitisation service. We're very pleased that Trove recently featured on Around DH, thanks to Alex Gill, and was nominated as one of our nation's most important digital humanities projects. So we'll have Tim Sherratt as one of our keynotes. We can also see some of our sponsors so far. The conference will be in partnership with the State Library of New South Wales, which is, we feel very strongly about the connection between digital humanities and libraries in our part of the world as it is in many other parts of the world. The conference will also be held in association with the LADHUL, Linked Open Data Libraries, Archives and Museums, third International Summit, which is coming to Australia for the first time. And that'll be held during the workshop days, so there'll be many things to choose from. On the Tuesday night, we'll share a joint function and a public lecture between our two events, which will be held at the State Library of New South Wales, our oldest library in Australia, and a beautiful place. We hope to organise private tours for our delegates. Although it's not confirmed, we're also negotiating with the GovHack. It's something going on right now. If you look up GovHack on Twitter, it's a major government hacking event that goes on over a weekend, and it takes place in I think 3 Australian states. So at the end of the conference, we hope to have the GovHack rolling on into the weekend so that people can make a full week in Sydney. But of course, if you want to come all that way from here, then you may as well make a holiday of it too and book ahead. And yeah, it's a great place. It sounds like it's winter in July, but that's the best time in Australia. You can go to the Barrier Reef and Uluru or Ayers Rock, and it's in winter in Sydney is sunny, typically is sunny and beautiful. The call for proposals will be coming out soon, and that's in the hands of the program committee that's already been working very hard to nominate and select keynotes, and is chaired by Deb Verhoeven from Deakin University in Australia. Thank you very much, Deb, for all of your work so far. We look forward to welcoming you to Sydney in 2015. That's all from me, but please come.
And in fact, we're thinking even further ahead, and to tell you about 2 years from now will be Maciej Eder and Jan Rybicki. Please.
Dzień dobry. You'll have to learn Polish to come to Krakow in Poland. Now, we're very excited, as you've probably noticed. We've been telling anyone we've been meeting here that, yes, you are coming to Krakow in 2 years' time. In fact, our conference is coming to Poland for the first time, and I think it's none too soon for a country of 40 million people. Now, not all of them are digital humanists, but the population is growing. It's also, I think it will be 18 years in 2016 that our conference went to Central Eastern Europe, and we're counting that this is going to further bolster the already visible development of digital humanities in that region. Now, let's try and show you where it is that you want to go. But as you see, I'm very excited, so I forgot to say that there's two of us here, because one of us represents the Jagiellonian University in Krakow, and the other, the Pedagogical University in Krakow. They will be organizing this conference jointly, and you know that this reminds you of something here. Of course, for the last couple of days, we've been wondering, how do we at least try to get close to the effort and all the nice things we've had here? I can promise you one thing: we'll sort of try to do something about the weather. So this is Krakow, caught on a sunny day. This is allegedly Europe's biggest medieval market, and up there on that tallest tower to the right, there's a crazy trumpeter who plays the hour every hour on a real trumpet, even at night, so you know what the time is. Because Krakow used to be the capital of Poland until the 16th century, we of course have to have a royal castle that you will have to visit. Now, some of its inhabitants were known to spout flames, but nowadays most inhabitants are easier on the eye, as you can see. And let me assure you, we don't have a major rodent problem. So. Krakow is above all a university center. It's 7 public universities and a couple of private ones. Make sure that there's about 250,000 students every academic year in the city. And this is the oldest building of the oldest university in Krakow, the Jagiellonian, founded 1364. Now, I'm not going to go now into the list of its illustrious students. I'll just mention one. Copernicus, and then it got better and better. Joseph Conrad did not go to that university because before he could do that, he ran off to sea from Krakow. However, Stanisław Lem wrote most of his mature science fiction in Krakow. So you can see that there's all sorts of fun things were going on, and they're still going on in Krakow. Okay, Maciej, you say things now.
Now a few words about the facts. So this is the main venue. It's a relatively newly building which can handle up to 1,200 people, which is, we hope, enough. How to switch the thing? Yeah, this way. So the main plenary session hall can be easily converted into 2 relatively big halls for 600 people each, plus there are some other 4 or 5 rooms available, plus 2 adjacent buildings. I'm trying to, this is the rooms available, plus a large space for posters, plus we try to provide, or we will provide, or we sort of promise to provide free lunches.
plus 2 adjacent buildings, one being a part of the Jagiellonian University and the other of the Pedagogical University, have another 4 big rooms for parallel sessions, so up to 10 or 11 parallel sessions can be held at those 2 universities. And, well, Krakow is in Europe. Krakow is a European city.
Yes, please remember that.
Most of the Poles are Europeans, and, well, I promise that there are no polar bears on the streets, not so many. And Krakow is very well connected to most European cities. I'm trying to.
Okay.
So go to Krakow also because of fun and games that we
Okay, just very briefly, because John is telling us to that we should stop. Now we're thinking of a fun run in the hills near the city. You will obviously have the choice of a city tour of the Nova Huta former workers' paradise socialist district, if you want. I would sort of suggest the medieval salt mine of Wieliczka, which is very interesting. You can lick the walls, but not too much. Or rafting in the Carpathians, very praised by many tourists. We're having some ideas about the banquet. That's one possibility. And, well, all we have to say now is do Krakowa.
So, and then I'd like to ask Melissa Terras, our program chair for this year, to come up and wrap things up a bit as far as the scientific program goes.
Well, this is it, right? After 2 years of planning, after 2,500 peer reviews from all of you good people to make 3 or 4 days of quite intense debate, this is it. It's nearly over. 2 things to tell you about. Firstly, you will be getting an email from John asking you to be a peer reviewer if you're not already. We'd really appreciate that. It will really help next year's programme. The second thing is I sent an email out this morning about the proceedings from this. We don't publish everything in the proceedings. We publish a select, the best of the conference. There was instructions within that. If you've got any questions, do get in touch. I will be editing that along with Deb and Claire and Frédéric, and we hope that by this time next year it will be a thing and we will have published the best 20 or 30 papers from this conference. So I just finally would like to thank everybody who peer reviewed, everybody who helped in the organisation of this, and especially to Claire and Frédéric for working with them to make this the conference that it was. Thank you all, and thank you so much.
And then you have heard from Claire and Frédéric regularly during the conference, and that's because they've both been absolutely indispensable. I think we should all be really grateful for their work that they've done here. But let's let them wrap it all up. Please.
As we say in French, à tout seigneur, tout honneur, so the last word will be for you, Frédéric. But before, practical announcement, so after this closing ceremony, we are going to the banquet dinner. It's just 3 minutes by foot, follow the people going there. And it seems that we have some sun right now, so we will enjoy it. It was for us really a nice moment. Thank you to Melissa, our dear PC chair. Thank you to Neil, our amazing other chair. It was really a nice experiment. À tout seigneur, tout honneur. Frédéric, let's go.
Okay. So we started with big red graphs showing people's name and their multiple connections. I think you got the idea, it was clear. I mean, it was to show that Digital Humanities is, first of all, it's a community. And so we asked Dario Rodighiero, our in-house Italian designer, to develop this idea into logos, into animation, into mugs, into T-shirts, into carpets, and you saw the disaster. The message was clear, okay? You, the conference attendees, you, the conference authors, are the one who makes this conference. So we end tonight with a slideshow of your faces taken during the conference in our photo booth. So look at these pictures. You are smiling. All of you. From dots in a graph to smiling faces. What a journey. This conference is not only about interdisciplinary, not only about computational methods, not only about humanities redefinition. When I see your faces, I know that digital humanities is also essentially about happiness. Happiness of sharing, happiness of discovering, happiness of being together for us, happiness to host so many of you this year. We would, of course, like to thank LADHUL for trusting our young and enthusiastic team 2 years ago. Claire and myself didn't really know what we were embarking on, but we were enthusiastic. We progressively realized that the boat was a bit big. And luckily, we were joined by extremely talented, hardworking, and helpful team. Kevin, you've just been incredible. You deserve really a thanks. Cyril, Dario, Yannick, Martin, Caterina, Alicia, Isabella, Vincent, Fouad, Andrea, Giovanni, Jorg, and all the other volunteers, thank you so much also, really. And now, to end on a personal note, maybe, my deep thanks to my colleague and long-lasting friend, Claire Clivaz. Okay, so how can we define Claire? Well, Claire, I think, is pure energy. She makes things move, people, institutions, countries. Actually, it's not an exaggeration to say that she's the one who has awakened Switzerland to digital humanities. She's the one who grabbed the arm of the politicians, the academics, the decision makers, and told them, hey, look, something is happening. And Switzerland must be part of it. She is the energy that has made us do digital humanities in Switzerland in the first place. So I'm sure that all of you that had the chance to talk with her during this conference felt this contagious enthusiasm. Organizing a conference is an adventure. Claire and I were friends when we decided to write the Lausanne bid to host DH 2014. 2 years later, by the time we close this huge conference, we are still friends. So Claire, I think this is our biggest achievement. Thank you to all of you. See you in 12 months exactly on the other side of the earth in sunny Sydney. Thank you all.
So I'm pleased to close this conference, the Digital Humanities 2014, and bon appetit.